So tell me about some fascism.
Well, the way I understand fascism is that fascism is defined as a system in which the state operates corporate levers of power, but they are privately owned. And socialism is the system in which the state simply owns and operates the corporations. And communism would be one in which there's no corporations or no money, or it's like the end product of the whole theoretical revolutionary system. But if you do take those definitions as given, and that would put them on a perfect spectrum away from liberty systems like America, free market, then you go to fascism, then socialism, then communism. So if you accepted that definition, then you would kind of call the GM thing a little bit fascist. Except the government in America is the people, ergo we all are the government, but we all own GM. But it is kind of fascist in nature, because we all own some GMs, or we're all owed money by GM. Like we all own some debt on some GM stock. So it is kind of fascistic in nature. Thus, though it would not necessarily be politically correct, or though it's definitely not politically correct to say it, and it would not necessarily be a wise thing to say it, you could, with that definition, technically call President Obama kind of fascistic.
But that was...
And then here's the other one, is I kind of, and this might just be me being ignorant, but I sort of fail to see where you really draw a fine distinction between a big government liberal and a socialist who wants, the state to control all the corporations and own and operate them. Ergo, when people say, you can't call President Obama a socialist because people don't understand what the word means and it just sounds bad and makes you sound like a lunatic, I say, I agree with that. But when they say, you can't call him a socialist because he isn't, he's a big government liberal, I'll think, I kind of agree with that, but really, how do you differentiate a big government liberal and a socialist? So, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable sitting in a room and giving it all of that discussion for qualification and then just going ahead and saying, I could call President Obama both a fascist and a socialist.
That sounds kind of fanatic.
Doesn't it? And that's the thing. Okay. And when you talk about religious mysticism, I think about these things at different times, and I write them out sometimes, and I have big, elaborate hypotheses that I'll think about them. But if I was to phrase a whole grand idea that probably should require 10 paragraphs to really summarize in a sentence or two, maybe I'm just sitting in the ER saying in a voice loud enough to be overheard, what if everything evil comes from God? What if God is both good and evil, and all of the horrible things that happen in your life are because of God? And people hear that and they're like, heresy! Burn him at the stake! That's the problem with religious mysticism and with deep political thought, is you can't summarize too much of it into a bumper sticker, Like, there are thoughts that are too big for just basic overview perceptions of. And maybe most people don't want to put those into deep issues. Julie seemed afraid of that in both politics and religion.
What about, I vote Republican because we can't all be on welfare?
That is a good bumper sticker. But, yeah, like, what I was getting at with it was, something about the definitions. Well, that's the big thing for me about fascism and socialism and calling people fascist and calling people socialist is, I don't know what people really mean when they say it. Except that I think I do, because no one really knows what fascist means. And we all have a vague idea what socialist means. We all know it means almost a communist. You might as well just call him a goddamn commie. But the only people that have clearly defined ideas of what socialists and fascists mean are punk college kids that call themselves socialists and post-fascists. And I don't understand. It's like the people that call themselves socialists seem to think fascists are the far end of the spectrum from them. And I'm sitting here thinking, it seems to me like fascists are only one step behind you guys. You should just be turning around to saying to the fascists, come a little further, guys. Grow your hair out, put down the jackboots, and just come with us into communism. We're all nutcase extremists, and we all oppose free markets, which this Republican and the deicides had here, you know.
What about libertarians?
Libertarians are on the other side of me from the fascists and the communists saying, let's legalize dope too. And I'm looking over there like, nah, I'm sorry dude, you are on the other side of the spectrum.
But they could tax the shit out of it.
Yes, but this is the biggest one for me. Is there's the arguments based on what actually happens where it is legalized, like in California, and I think even in Seattle now, where it doesn't seem like it reduces the crime. But the biggest one for me is just, if the government sanctions it, it strikes me that more people will do it, and more specifically, if I have children, I can't fucking live in Seattle anymore. How could I possibly tell my children don't do drugs and have any legitimacy in saying that when I walk them down the streets of Seattle and they see dispensary after dispensary advertising marijuana? They're going to be like, well, you're just stodgy. What's it matter? I mean, they're selling it, aren't they? They sell cigarettes and you smoke cigarettes. How can I freaking have any... I couldn't have any authority like that, so that's why I would have to oppose it. I'm appalled at the freaking... Just, you walk down Greenwood in Aurora, and it's like green cross after green cross, and you're like, wow. And it doesn't seem like it's diminished the crime at all. Aurora's still scummy.
But you need your green card. Which a doctor has.
And the best thing about that, I've heard people say they're keeping track of those, and that makes me so happy. Because people have said to me before, dude, you should get that green card. I'm like, I would feel pathetic if I had a fucking card saying I was legally registered to be a dopehead. I would feel like such a loser. But if they're keeping track of those losers, that makes me so happy. Like, we should have them on a list. Cousin Jerry has one. He needs to be on a list.
Do you think there's Republicans or conservatives that have those cards?
I would say there are people that you could probably call conservative, but are libertarian-leaning conservatives that have those cards. I wouldn't rule it out.
Are there moderate conservatives?
Probably. Well, it's hard to say. I'd like to say, well, conservatives tend to be more animated by their principles than liberals, and therefore I tend to doubt that they come in as high numbers. But, well, actually the first half of that would be just arrogant to say, but the second half is true. I'm sure the majority of people that have those kind of cards would consider themselves liberal in their thought, or libertarian in their thought, and people that call themselves conservative would be leery of being the kind of person to have that card. But I can't really say unequivocally, just I believe necessarily that conservatives are more than liberals animated by principle. Just more that I think conservatives have thought through those principles more.
What about ideals?
Well, that's just it. I agree with Dennis Prager, even when I'm thinking, your rhetoric sounds kind of harsh to an independent's ear when he says leftism this and liberalism that, because what he's essentially saying about them is once he said it perfectly. He says something about rigorous thinking, and then he said, there are no rigorous thinkers on the left. once you rigorously think things through, you become a conservative. And I was like, I think I'd have to agree with that. Because it's so based on feeling. Anytime I freaking get into a discussion with Caroline, she'd say, we discussed food stamps. I was like, well, let's take Jennifer as an example. Jennifer's got her freaking kid, and she's taking food stamps and so forth, and then she comes to work, and she's hungover and burned out, and I'm just thinking, if you've got a kid, I don't really approve of the idea that you're taking drugs and drinking booze every night and just being a party animal. Like, you should be responsible in raising your kid, right? But then, I'm fucking paying for your subsistence while you're doing this, and that kind of galls me. And she says, so what, you'd have her starve then? And I said, if you cut her food stamps off, she wouldn't starve. Someone would arise to fill the need, or she'd get it, she'd change her behaviors, or something. Like, people do what they have to do to survive. And she was not even accepting that reasoning. She just kept appealing to my vanity, I think. She was saying, you just have them starve? Like, you're evil, this and that. And I was like, well, firstly...
Starve? How much food could you buy with the money that a bottle of booze costs?
Exactly. Well, that was the thing. I said, I was trying to get these two thoughts through to her skull, and it was very hard because she did not seem to be wanting to listen to either one. But the first one was, I disagree about people's nature. I believe that everyone that's on public assistance of some sort or another, if it stopped completely right then and there, the absolute majority would find some way around it. And for those that didn't, there will be people that will step up and see that there's a need and they will help. Because this is America, and we're fucking all rich, and we're all pretty generous compared to, like, Europeans or most other rich countries. Like, we're, by and large, a pretty good people as Americans. And furthermore, that people just, you do what you have to do to survive, I could have been a much less lazy bum when I was last unemployed, because I had Julie and her parents were right there, and they took really nice care of us. But if they weren't there, I'd have done something else, Like, I wasn't going to fucking starve to death.
Yeah.
Like, well, firstly, because it's America, and no one starves to death in the streets in America. But just in general, it's like, you're going to do what you got to do. Like, you're a living being, you're an animal. Animals do what they got to do to survive, and human beings are not exempt from that. So that's one side of it. And I was trying to get that one across. I was like, if she lost her food stamps, she'd stop spending her money on booze and drugs, maybe. Or maybe she'd be stealing shit and pawning it. But the thing is, firstly, that people do what they need to survive. And will generally do what they need to do to get themselves where they prefer to be in life in terms of material comfort, at a bare minimum, at any rate. Secondly, people rise to the level that is expected of them. So, if everyone's got this big sense of shame and the social expectation is, if you knock a girl up, you're going to marry her, then the thing is, there's going to be a lot less fornication than there is in a society when abortion is just viewed very casually, and divorce is not have any stigma and so forth. There's way more pregnancy today, way higher pregnancy rates today than, say, 60 years ago. Not because we're all admitting to our pregnancies and not sneaking off to the back alley, but because people actually were not as openly having sex with each other back then, because there was that social expectation, right? So there was the two sides of that. It's like, you do what you got to do, and you rise to the level that's expected to you. But the other one I was trying to get through was, don't even try let's assume that I didn't feel that way, because I was actually pretty drunk when we were having the conversation, so I didn't even elaborate all of that big thought there. What actually happened was, she said, so you just take away the food stamps and have her starve? And I said, yes.
Plain and simple.
Are you going to appeal to my morality? Don't bother, I don't feel that. Because I believe those things I just told you right there, I can say that, because it's like, I don't think that's the case. But you know what? How are you going to appeal to my morality anyway? It's like, if you don't believe in God, what's your sense of morality come from? Like, How are you going to sit there and play the nag at me? Fuck you. I don't give a fuck about your moralities. Because that's the thing for me, too. It's just like, I don't believe... It's the same with my politics. I don't believe in social this or community that. I believe in individual action. I believe I'll take care of myself. I'll make my own goddamn decisions. If I need a job, I'll go fucking find a job and do my best to avoid taking money from other people. If I have to in a situation, then I'll be glad it's there, but I prefer not to do it because I've got my honor. And then, by the same token, I'll freaking just as soon not be ordered by the law to buy a particular health insurance plan. Thank you very much, you know? So in that regard, that's where I see modern-day left-wing politics as being hard to distinguish from socialism and communism. It's all based on community and a group. And they think about people as groups. It's all like your race and your gender and your, you know, what victim group you fall into. And then you listen to the conservatives and they're talking about individuals. And I think I would much rather side with individuals because I tend to dislike people as a general rule. Because I've had that experience in life where people have usually been kind of nasty to me. I'm like, fuck people. I don't want to be a part of a group. I don't want to be a part of a community. And another one is that it's been observed that causes are something for small people, because small people need to feel a part of something bigger, and being a part of a cause is a way to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And for me, I can think, well, if I'm religious, then I have that part of my life filled. I have a relationship with God who is obviously far larger than myself, so I can look at a cause and just think, I have no need to feel part of something larger than myself. Frankly, I'm scared of things that are larger than myself.
Such as God.
Exactly. But for someone that doesn't believe in God, there is that need in your life because human beings need a purpose. That's one reason why I believe in God, is because it seems so obvious to me that to be a healthy human being, you have to have a purpose, and no other animal has anything like that. They eat and they fornicate and they have a good time, or they get eaten and die, you know. But for human beings, it's like you got to have something you're doing. You need to have a purpose in your life, which would be, you know, that side of the human being where it's God's image. You're an animal, but you still have like the godly side where God has purpose, and it's like you got to do something with that. You got to not waste the gift of life. But if you don't believe in God and you still have the need for the purpose, then that's how it manifests, is you're a part of a cause. You join into the group and you go to the rallies. That's a big one.
You mean like legalizing weed?
Well, yeah, I mean, just whatever your cause is, you can join into the cause. But the Obama thing, for me, one thing that was scary about it was like the rallies and the posters and just the worshipfulness of it, because I don't like the idea of a rally. I've always thought this was a great line, is to say, I would feel uncomfortable at a rally because I think that if you are in a room where too many people think the same thing, there is just not enough thinking going on. Whenever you think about things enough, there's always disagreement. And so when you're in a room full of people that all think the same thing and are all looking in the same direction at the same person, that just seems kind of like they're all ready to go.
What about those Tea Party rallies?
I don't like a Tea Party rally. I've never been to one. I sympathize with the cause of Rick Santelli saying, well, here's the thing about Tea Parties. When they first sprouted up, I thought it was like, this can go one of two ways, but it will go the one. It could be a bipartisan thing where Democrats and Republicans come together and say, $16 trillion in debt? Like, the government is going out of control here. Like, we need to rein in government spending. And everyone should realize that. And it just becomes the moderate baseline default political position. And it seems like there is an extent to which that is the case in America. But I immediately thought there will be both in media perception and in reality, that element where Tea Party becomes associated with conservative Republican, where it's going to be religious in nature, it's going to have social conservative leanings, and it will be painted by the media like that. And they will embrace it. The social conservatives will embrace that. And so in the future, when you hear about Tea Party rallies, it could as easily be a revivalist kind of meeting as it could be a cut government spending rally. And I think that there is truth to both of them. That there are some Tea Party rallies where it's probably more focused on proper Tea Party things, but there's also a large element where they're all Sarah Palin voters. Because I wrote about this in an essay too, as an example. It's a good example of how the media paint things. The public perception is that the Tea Party was the creation of Fox Media. At least in Seattle, the public perception was. Tea Party was the creation of Fox Media, nurtured in opposition to Obamacare. But in fact, Tea Party started with Rick Santelli via Rush Limbaugh and was in opposition to the stimulus bill. It was the stimulus that began the Tea Party, but Obamacare came a month later. So the stranger can say to people in Seattle, those Tea Party people just hate Obamacare, but it was really about the stimulus.
What I remember about the Tea Party was mostly Sarah Palin, I thought.
Exactly. Because Sarah Palin voters...
was like, we don't want your health care.
Sarah Palin voters are the kind of people that most eagerly embrace it. All of those people in red state America were immediately like, Tea Party, woo! Because they're big on, reading the Constitution anyways. So, they're just the term Tea Party turned them all on. And I knew immediately that was how it was going to happen. And I was like, oh, it's going to be such a beautiful missed opportunity. And to a large extent it was. But there may still be enough of a Tea Party presence in America where it actually is focused on budget issues. I don't know, because I don't go to rallies.
And have you heard of Romney Care?
Yeah, in Massachusetts.
I don't know about Massachusetts, but I've heard the term Romney Care.
Well, it's because he was governor of Massachusetts, and he signed a bill into law in Massachusetts that was similar in nature. It had an individual mandate, like Obamacare does. And that was the issue about it. But Romney was of the opinion, or at least of the stated opinion, that what was good for Massachusetts was not necessarily good for the country. Which is pretty much my thought, too. I'm like, I don't fucking care what he did in Massachusetts. What's he going to do for the country at large? And if he doesn't believe that that's the kind of thing the federal government should do, then I agree with him. Because I'm all like, well, I'll see what Washington wants to do, and when Washington becomes intolerable to me, then I'll find someplace else to live. But for the moment, Washington's not that bad yet.
Like, hey, by law, here's this health care you have to buy.
If Washington had an individual mandate, I might be like, well, I don't like the politics of it, but it is the state's decision, and I do think you should have health insurance, so that's that. I mean, I'll go with that flow, but the big one for me is when people say, are you a crazy pro-life lunatic? I'll say, well, yes, but politically, this is where I really stand, is I think every state should be allowed to make their own laws, however crazy loose or crazy tight they may be, which would mean that I think Roe versus Wade should be overturned. I think it was wrongly adjudicated and is bad law, but I recognize that Washington State will have very liberal abortion laws, and that does not bother me enough that I'm going to leave Washington State. Like, I'm not appalled by it. I know how people think about it. I just wouldn't have wanted Julie to get an abortion. But even that's crazy to most people. They're like, but it's her choice. And I'd be like, but it's also my child too. Like, there's that element too. And I don't think we even recognize that as society anymore. Because if you have a wife and the kids and you get divorced, the default is like, of course the woman gets the kids. And if you're the father, you have to actually fight for the custody. unless the woman's drunk or some such, you know. Unless you can prove she's like a really bad parent, it's like pretty much a default that you'll have to fight for your custody rights.
And in such a situation, it's still wrong to have an abortion.
Well, I actually think I've phrased my opinions the best just by saying adoption is pretty much invariably better than abortion. And I think I can say that and not horrifyingly offend pro-choice people and still summarize what I'm trying to get across. Because that is kind of how I feel about it. That's what I said to Caroline, actually. Caroline Prego. And I was like, I said, so what are you going to do? And she said, well, I had the chance to get an abortion and I haven't yet. I feel like I shouldn't. And I said, you shouldn't. You should put them up for adoption. And she says, but if I'm carrying it around for 9 months, then that'll feel weird. And I said, yeah, it'll be the fucking hardest thing you'll ever do. But if you have an abortion, you could really regret it in 20 years. And if you raise it yourself without anyone around, you'll really regret it in 2 months.
Yeah, and my biggest problem is why would she have a kid when apparently she's nowhere near ready financially, and apparently no father figure in the plan.
Well, I'm going to tell her too. I'm going to say, you know what? You can't even take care of yourself. You have no business attempting to raise a child. But if you've already felt like you shouldn't get an abortion, that's your fucking cue. You've pretty much got 2 options. You can abort or adopt. Well, 3 options because you can pray for a miscarriage. But, yeah. It's pretty much going to be like, it's either abortion or adoption for you. You cannot fucking raise a kid. Like, she can't. She can't.
Do you think she did it for public assistance?
No, she was drunk and got knocked out. I know Caroline. Yeah, she was drunk and got knocked out. But I'm so happy that she thought it was wrong, like, even for that 1 second. So I've kind of just been thinking to myself, like, fucking hope you put it up for adoption. It's just my preference, but I'm not going to judge her, you know, whatever decision she makes. Just, I'm going to tell her, like, you can't fucking raise the kid. And I think you will regret an adoption less than an abortion. You may dislike the idea of putting him up for adoption, but I think you'll feel a lot better about yourself if you do that than if you abort him. Because 20 years later, you could think to yourself, what would the name have been of that child? Where would they be now? They're not here. But if you put them up for adoption, you'll know.
Now the flip side of the coin, could she, in the next months until it's born, could she prepare to be ready to raise the child?
I have very significant doubts that she would be able to turn herself into that kind of person that quick. She needs a well, no. There has to be the father figure, and she doesn't even know who. Yeah, so, no. That kid's either got to be put up for adoption, or it's going to be an abortion. I mean, to the best of my speculation, at any rate, actually, because in fact I can't read the future, but it does strike me, and I will tell her that those are pretty much the only plausible options. I just had such a deja vu from Montana, looking in the corner of your fucking room.
You're in Montana?
I've just been getting such deja vu occasions so hardcore lately. And it kind of bothers me because I've known for at least 3 months I was about to get fired.
Uh-huh.
In June, I started writing down my punches. All of my times that I punched in and out, I've been writing them down since mid-June, end of June. In July, I started taking photographic evidence of the working conditions that I was in. So evidently, it's been in the back of my mind pretty hardcore recently. And last week, I had a dream where I'd been fired, and I was going to work afterwards to talk to people and being like, yeah, I was fired. So I think I knew it was fucking coming. And I brought it on myself because I showed everyone, like, where I fucking took a piece of glass and just started chopping at myself. I showed it to my bosses, too, and I was like, I started cutting myself because I'm so stressed. And so then they fired me for cracking up. Like, I probably was just asking for it. I think that's how bad I wanted away from that job. Well, no, that wasn't... Because I don't believe you see the future in your dreams. I think you see into your subconscious in your dreams. So I think, subconsciously, I was trying to get fired. And I knew I was going to try to get myself fired, so I started writing down my punches and building up the case for what I was going to do with it. Like, I was just asking for a way out of that job. That's how bad I wanted away, was I just sabotaged myself, subconsciously. And it worked all too well. And I'm going to get to have a bitter, protracted legal fight with them on the way out the door, so that actually accomplished my purpose. I'll get to raise some hell on the way out. Fuck yeah. But where it tied in was the subconscious, what you do to yourself, what you think. Caroline? I don't remember. But isn't that fucking funny? Like, I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days because when it happened, I was like, I knew this was coming. Get the state involved in it.
And unemployment isn't a form of public assistance, is it? It is something we pay into.
It's insurance. So here's the thing. If I go on food stamps, and then I get a really good job, like if I was working at Boeing and making more money than I would actually spend on the basic necessities, then my honor would probably demand that at some point I repay the money that I drew from food stamps. But I don't know if I would feel that way about unemployment, just because I'm like, I already fucking paid into this. And when they were talking about the tax thing, I was just thinking that. I was like, you fucking tax my paycheck for federal taxes, then you tax my paycheck for unemployment insurance, then when I'm drawing the unemployment insurance, you tax that for federal taxes. Like, what is this fucking bullshit with federal taxes? Fuck you guys.
So it's like you already paid into it.
And then when I do my taxes, it's going to be all fucked up because I did unemployment, and they're going to make me pay taxes on it again, I bet.
Yeah. Unless you have them take the taxes out right away, because then it's all squared away. Because when it's untaxed, you can just get a big ass bill at the end of the year.
I'm just wondering if I claim unemployment and I'm awarded unemployment, and I draw
Now, what about same-sex
before the end of the year
being recognized by your state?
I oppose that, and that is the reason why I most want to vote in this year's election, is because I'm all like, every vote is going to count in that one, and I'm really seriously hardcore about that one, because we have civil union law, which I thought was beautiful. I was like, that's a good Washington State thing. We've got an everything but marriage bill, which satisfies both parties, because it's like, alright, well, we've pretty much got gay marriage, but at the same time we're going to say, you know what, you can't have the word. We'll give you everything but the actual word itself, which satisfies the people who are opposed to it. And then if they just freaking have the gay marriage thing, it's like, alright, well, you didn't do anything except take half of Washington State and be like, you know what, fuck you. We took your word too. We now did, quote, we now did literally redefine the institution as you know it. And I think that that would be just a very arrogant form of politics. But here's the thing is, if Washington State votes to have legally recognized gay marriage, it would be the only state in the Union to have done so. 1 out of 33. And even Oregon actually turned it down on a vote basis. So I kind of doubt that it will. In The Stranger, the article on the Republican National Convention He was like, Mitt Romney whipped these people up into a big frenzied crowd froth of fear because, these people know that America opposes them on abortion, on gay marriage, and this and that they're out of the mainstream, but, they cling to this and that. And I was thinking, do the people that read The Stranger really believe that American public is with Stranger and the Stranger readership on gay marriage? Because there's absolutely no evidence to support that. It's been on the ballot in 33 states and has been voted down 33 times. It is only legally recognized in states where the legislature or the judiciary acts against the will of the people. And even in California, when it's put on the ballot, it can't pass. There's no state where a majority of people indicate that they would vote to legally recognize gay marriage. But
I thought it passed in a state.
it's the law in 6 or 7 states, but it's never been passed by voter referendum. It has only been passed by an act of legislature or by the ruling of a judge. Even Oregon voted against it, which is
legal in Oregon.
No, it's not.
California?
No, unless Proposition 8 was overturned by a judge, which I don't remember if has happened or not.